in the first 10 years from 2010 to 2020, we tried a lot of different things. We tried between 2016 and 2020, we added sales and marketing consulting services to the suite of services that we provide, added HR by that time. So that really kind of put us into three, arguably four verticals. We thought there would be a lot of synergy from that. And it turns out we were wrong.
Welcome to Trailblazers, an Allied Executives podcast, where high-performing business owners and their top executives unpack the nuances of starting, building, and leading a growing business. By bringing together members of our community to share their wins, losses, observations, and lessons learned along the way, we hope that it'll help you shorten your time frame to success on your entrepreneurial journey. Trailblazers is hosted by Kurt Theriault, that's me, President of Allied Executives, and Kathy Hollenhorst, one of Allied's lead peer group facilitators and a former owner and leader at Creatus, a 24/7 company. Allied Executives is a business owner and executive peer group community that champions continuous improvement where driven people can learn, grow, and be challenged. If we know one thing, it's that owning and growing your own business can be rewarding and challenging, and also a very lonely proposition. But there's no need to go at it on your own. So let's bring on today's Trailblazers and get this conversation started. All right. Hello and welcome to Trailblazers. I'm Kurt Theriault, President of Allied Executives, and joining me as my co-host today is one of my colleagues, Kathy Hollenhorst. Hello, Kathy.
Hello, Kurt. I am so pleased to be your sidekick on our new Trailblazer series, and I can't wait for our conversation with Molly and Rick today.
Yeah, well, today we have the privilege of bringing you our first episode of Trailblazers, which is a discussion with Rick Nordvold, who is the founder and CEO, and Molly Hiller, who is the partner president and CFO of Growth Operators here in the Twin Cities. So what's Trailblazers? This is a fun pursuit of ours where we get the opportunity to feature members of the growing Allied community and dive into the nuances of starting, building, and leading a growing business, and of course, talk about some of the lessons learned along the way. So we'll also plug into beyond that and try to find out what makes our members tick, what keeps their fires burning, and also, how they stay on top of their game outside of the office. So we'll look forward to that conversation. Got a great one planned today around 1% better every day and stories from growing a professional services firm. So Kathy, thanks for joining me. Glad to have you as my co-host, and let's dive in. Before we start, let's give a little context on who Certainly Growth Operators is and who Rick and Molly, you guys are, and your backgrounds, and then we'll go from there. Growth Operators is an advisory firm here in the Twin Cities. They work with growing companies who find themselves constrained by, underdeveloped finance, accounting, and HR capabilities. The firm was started in 2010 by Rick as a kind of a solo venture, and we're going to dive into that story. But before you did that, Rick, you spent 20 years in various finance and operational leadership roles, including stints at Arthur Andersen in public accounting, with Best Buy in corporate development, Gulf Galaxy as the CFO, and you led their initial IPO and eventual merger with Dick's Sporting Goods, and then with Griffin International Companies as their CFO, COO. And beyond that, serve on numerous for-profit and nonprofit boards, and enjoy the great outdoors and something near and dear to mine and my colleagues Kathy's heart, a little golf when you can squeeze it in.
I don't have the game you do, though, Kurt.
Ah, well,
Wish I did.
That's a different episode. Kathy, how about a little bit about Molly?
Yes, it's my pleasure to be able to give a little background information on you, Molly. So Molly started in public accounting and had various roles at Arthur Andersen for several years, then moved over to Target Corporation, had several years there, and then went out and started her own boutique services business, right? I think I got all that right, which is very exciting. And then you joined Growth Operators in 2012. And I love your journey with Growth Operators because from what I understand, you started in a client-facing consultant role. And if I have it right, it was kind of your model of excellence that really helped define Growth Operators' unique service model. So we're going to hear more about that, which is exciting. I know from there you moved in to take over client services. And now, as Kurt mentioned, are the partner president and CFO for the organization, part of the leadership team, defining all the strategy and supporting the growth for the business. So welcome. One final fun fact, like me, Molly is a graduate of the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management. Sorry, my apologies to the other two of you, but we will end with saying, row the boat, Sky Uma, go Gophers. Okay.
Yes, a big week in these parts
Mhm.
for members of the Gophers. So very cool. For a little further context too, for Rick and from Molly, how many team members do you have today? Just so our users know a little bit more. I mean, our listeners know a little bit more about growth operators, and then the geography and scope at which you deliver your services.
All right. Well, we have 65 terrific people on the team. It is it's our 14th anniversary this month. So started the
Congratulations.
business. It was a business of one back in October 2010. As far as our scope of services, we're a finance, accounting, and human resources consulting firm, and we focus on the middle market segment, which broadly speaking are companies from 10 million in revenues up to a billion. But in particular, we really focus on the bottom half. Our typical client's going to be 500 million in revenues and less. A lot of them are owned by private equity or they have venture capital investors. That's about 70% of our clients, with the remaining 30% being typically founder-owned, privately held businesses that are growing fast and wondering how to keep up with all of that in the back office.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for that background. That helps. Well, let's jump in. Rick, let's start with you. Why did you start Growth Operators?
Well, a couple things. I had great experience, quite frankly, that I didn't deserve as early in my career as I got it. But I had the good fortune of being the CFO of two different companies in the middle market, Golf Galaxy for one, Griffin International was the other, which is now part of a business called Cities Market Studios here in Minneapolis. But my experience at those two businesses really taught me firsthand just how much a strong back office could really propel growth and value in a business. The other thing being, I had a pretty keen awareness of the fact that that was rare. I had a lot of friends of mine that were in private equity and or running businesses in the middle market, and they all talked about just how tough it was to find great back office, in particular great CFO talent coming from the background I came from. So kind of taking those two things, I had a thesis that there was a market that needed this, and I just hung out a shingle and tested that theory, and 14 years later, here we are.
Love it.
Congratulations on the 14-year anniversary. That's pretty exciting. And Molly, I'm going to throw it over to you now. So kind of two parts. Talk to us, what was your trigger to join Growth Operators initially, and then stay on and now be part of the executive leadership team there?
So I got reconnected with Rick through a college friend. So we both started our career, like you said, at Arthur Andersen. But when I got reconnected in probably about year two of what Rick was starting, and when he explained the vision to me, it resonated with me. I saw the potential there at that time and still do today. I really enjoy client service, and I was all in.
Love it. You guys have a very cool timeline on your website that caught my attention, that kind of shows the journey. And I think that's always an interesting part of the story when we talk about 14 years all at once goes so fast, but when you look at the images, it feels like forever ago sometimes. But, Rick, can you describe an early breakthrough or success during this timeline that you had after launching and how it influenced the eventual direction of the firm?
Yeah, I would say, Kurt, we tried a lot of different things in the first, I would say, 10 years of the business. I think I really started the business first kind of under the premise, bet the garden, not the farm. I wasn't getting into I was taking a risk. I was 40 years old when I started a business, which quite frankly is really kind of a dumb age to take a risk and become an entrepreneur when I had three kids that were bearing down on college and rather than stay in the safe confines of, corporate America, I decided to take a risk. But the great thing is we're in an industry where you can bet the garden, not the farm. We didn't have to build a big factory and fill it with expensive equipment and hope that customers would show up. And so I would say the biggest kind of breakthrough, I would say, was, about 7 or 8 years into our business. So this would have been 2008, 2000 or 2018, 2019 timeframe. Up until then, the people that we had brought onto the team, we were very top heavy. We started out in 2010. We were finance and accounting only. We added HR in 2017, but most of our people at that time were former senior executives that came out of finance and accounting roles, mainly CFO roles in industry, or CHRO, CPO, chief people officer type roles. And I would say for us, one of the biggest breakthroughs was when we made the deliberate decision to leverage our model, bring in junior talent. And that really did two great things for us. One, in terms of serving our clients, our senior people are expensive. They need to be. They deserve to be. They've got a lot of experience. And by bringing in junior talent, we were able to provide services to our clients and leverage those people at lower costs, which made it more affordable. But the other thing it really did was helped us in our recruiting, because the senior folks we were recruiting onto the team loved the fact that they could mentor and develop our younger folks. That's one of the things they enjoyed most about their career, and they have that opportunity here. Conversely, for the junior folks on our team, they have the ability to come in and learn from folks that have the kind of career experience that they're getting. And so when you combine those two things, by leveraging the model, it really drove the growth in our business.
Molly, I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that unique client services model, because you lived it in market and then you were leading it. So just give us a few takeaways on what is unique about that client services model? What works so well?
We call it the team approach, right? It's kind of how we can come together as a team and kind of service a client that way. That's a little different than other models that are out there. And it's really truly consulting, right? So it's how you can be a consultant and leverage not only the skills and talent, but the knowledge, right? So it also provides a really fun work environment for our people because they're on engagements with teams, and they really can make a huge difference with the clients. They can honestly do more, progress faster, and make a better difference in that work.
Great. Yeah, thank you. All right, Rick, we're going to come back to you on this. At what point, as you were growing the firm, Molly had joined you a couple of years after that, but as you're gaining traction and you're growing, but what was that tipping point where you realized you needed more help within the operational side, admin side, to grow faster? What was that tipping point? Tell us about that.
Yeah, Kathy, I would say it really came in 2020. Believe it or not, it was partially the pandemic and partially due to the fact that we restructured our business that year. So, as I mentioned earlier, in the first 10 years from 2010 to 2020, we tried a lot of different things. We tried between 2016 and 2020, we added sales and marketing consulting services to the suite of services that we provide, added HR by that time. So that really kind of put us into three, arguably four verticals. We thought there would be a lot of synergy from that. And it turns out we were wrong. There just wasn't the synergy we thought. I think we had 19 or 20 people at that time. And frankly, talking to prospects about a 20-person firm having deep expertise in four different disciplines, it was a tough message to land. And so what we did at that time is we spun off our sales and marketing business, and we just focused in on finance and HR. And we actually we closed that restructuring at the end of February of 2020.
Oh, wow.
About 12 days later, the pandemic broke out in full force. It was, I think, in the same day, the NBA shut down the rest of its season. They called off March Madness. And I was on vacation with my family out in California, going to a family wedding. And really, frankly, thought we may not have a business at the end of this year. We really having that uncertainty and not knowing how the rest of the year would pan out. I was certainly wrong in assuming we wouldn't have our business, because what happened is our business grew 40% that year. Didn't expect that, but really reinforced to me that a lot of times the best way to grow is to really focus in on the things that be best in class at. And there's plenty of growth potential in those things. You can absolutely grow by pruning.
I love that answer. There's so much richness in that. across the allied community, we talk a lot about the growth stages a company needs to traverse and how that requires different things from the founder and the early leaders to continue that growth. Molly, let's start with you this time. What were some pivotal decisions or strategies that helped accelerate your growth over this past few years since that pandemic?
Mm-hmm. It feels like we took a big initiative on like every year, maybe even like 2 per year. So not afraid to take it on and not afraid to get through the change. Maybe starting kind of from that point on, first we changed kind of our delivery format. Like Rick said, we really honed in on that team approach. We started marketing ourselves that way. And really that was a different conversation, as it wasn't typically what the market understood us to be. So we had to kind of change that. Then we undertook kind of like a standardization process, making sure everybody was kind of doing it the same way. We have a tool that helps us do that was kind of born out of the pandemic and having kind of time to work on that. So that helped us with our standardization. And then in another year, we changed our whole comp model, which I know a lot of founders, go through that phase where they have to just scrap what kind of got them there and get on a program of sustainable compensation. That's always a fun one. So we got through that one. And then, really then more recently, it's been on a focus on quality and the quality of our service and the building of our relationships. This is a relationship business, and it's important that all throughout the organization, we know how to build those relationships, maintain them, and go, cultivate more. So that's been our kind of focus. And each of, those strategies and the work that's behind the scenes to make those happen, that's kind of been a focused effort on all fronts.
Well, did you intentionally stage them? Because you kind of said, did one and then, or because I have a colleague right now and they did 3 big change initiatives all at once, which I thought was quite ambitious.
I guess I'm always accused of doing too much, right, Rick? I like take on too much, try too much. Yeah. So
never taken on too much. You have an amazing ability to make it all work, no matter how much you bite off.
I mean, some of this was necessity. Some were very clear that we had to do these first, and then we kind of bit them off. It did feel like they were coming all at once and fast and furious, and kind of just had to put our heads down and do them. And I would just say some of that, and maybe you're going to ask me that, what were the challenge in that? But you really have to have your leadership on board. They don't have to be as hard as they sound if you have your leadership team kind of around it and championing it. But yeah, some just presented themselves as that we must do this. This changes everything. And this is how, I'll take the compensation. That changes how we retain our people. That's how we recruit our people. I mean, it's pivotal. We have to do it. And it's something you have to plan for, you have to execute well, and then kind of maintain. So yeah, it was a lot of big changes in that short amount of time.
And I think that's probably, if there is a positive coming out of the pandemic and COVID, I think that was one. As business leaders, we all learned that sometimes you just gotta go, and it shifted, labor costs going up. You had to make those changes. Let's go to you, Rick. What would you add? What kind of, as you think of that, as you're accelerating growth, what were some of those pivotal things that happened, or pivotal thinking or decisions you made?
Yeah, there are a couple more that come to mind because, really starting from the pandemic, not only were we up 40% revenue wise in 2020, but really for the next, for the next 4 years beyond that, we grew at a compound annual growth rate of over 30%. So, I think a couple of things that I would add to it that were pretty pivotal changes for us. One really being more of a, outwardly facing kind of go-to-market effort is, we, as a consulting firm, we don't have the luxury of recurring revenues. Molly and I both started out in public accounting, and in public accounting, you have recurring revenues. The audit side of a public accounting firm is typically auditing the same businesses year over year. Switching costs are high, so and you pick up more clients along the way, but there's a stickiness to those services, and in addition to that, they're doing tax returns for the same companies and individuals year in and year out. So that revenue recurs, and it gives them a platform of, a lot of different clients to sell other services to. We knew we didn't really have that, but we did know that a lot of the businesses in our target market segment are owned by private equity firms. The middle market is huge. I mean, it's 40+% of GDP comes from businesses that are in our target market. 40%, over 40% of private sector employees work for companies that are middle market companies. So this is a big segment, but how do you reach them? It's hard to knock on all those doors. But when you have thousands of them that are owned by private equity firms, we just simply put a strategy in place from a go-to-market perspective to go out and build relationships with these private equity firms. Typical private equity firm that we're working with owns 8 to 10 businesses. And a year from now, they're going to own 8 to 10 businesses, but 2 to 3 of them will be new businesses that they bought to replace the businesses that they sold. So that really is our recurring revenue strategy, is really building those relationships with private equity firms and earning their confidence. The second thing that comes to mind is internal. Molly talked about scalability, and really kind of the whole title of the podcast being these 1% improvements. We knew that, like every small business, we didn't invest in a big expensive ERP system right from the beginning. We did what most businesses do. You get QuickBooks Online, you can sign up for that and pay as you go. And then we had different systems to, track our employees' time so we know how much to bill our clients. We had other systems that we just kind of duct taped and baling wired together for the first 12 years. And then as we saw, the growth, we needed to have a scalable option. So Molly led an initiative, and her team led an initiative a couple of years ago to put in a new ERP system. And, the brand we've put on it, our internal brand is Timber, TMBR. It stands for Team Member Business Resource. And so really that one system takes us from everything, we call it lead to cash. We do our CRM system, general ledger system, and our PSA system. That's professional services automation, which is a fancy way of saying, the system where, we decide which resources get staffed on what engagements, and, we bill our clients because they're entering their time. Molly's team did all that back a couple of years ago. And it was, in my career, the first systems implementation that was done on time and on budget, in fact, under budget. So really credit to the team for making that happen. But, what that did for us, that's going to allow us to scale, for the next 10 years and well beyond that.
Awesome. For sure, the first time I ever heard on time and on budget with
Under budget.
It doesn't happen.
Like, if I can interrupt on that, I think one of the things about that is that you got to get ahead of when you need that software. And I guess that would be my advice on that is, if you wait until you're just drowning in it, then you will be kind of behind and over budget because you had kind of outgrown the pace. But we were really ahead of it. I credit the foresight of Rick's vision on that. He said, this is where we're going and this is what we will need. So why wait? We can get it in, get this system in while we're small and malleable, and we will form into this. And that's exactly what happened. So it was easier to do, and when we were that size, and now we've grown with it and reaping the benefits of it.
Okay, give us Timber again. Team member.
It's like if you take the word team member and just drop all the vowels out of it. So that basically spells, timber. And yeah.
I have Kesha going through my head right now.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sure you guys have used that when you launched that to the whole team, no doubt, right?
We didn't, Kurt, but man, we should have consulted with you before we launched.
Use a guy like you, I'm shocked. So, well, okay, no doubt there's been a few growing pains along the way as well. I'd ask each of you to kind of share maybe one example of a major kind of challenge or obstacle you overcame along the way, and what was it? What'd you do about it? How'd you tackle it? Which one of you would love to start?
I think the move to a standard process, I think that's a common one that folks, when you start off, everybody has, it's a bit of a wild, wild west, and people like that about small businesses. They can kind of do, processes kind of however you want it to be. And then, but when it's time to grow up and put that standardization in, you don't want to lose what was good about being small, but you also need to have the consistency to call yourself a business, right? So when we made those moves, that required leadership. It required getting people on board and having to, see the vision of that. And gosh, if you don't have that leadership, it's just, without it, it's just much, much harder than it needs to be. So I think that was a growing pain that we went through.
That's That's a great one. Rick, what would you say to that question?
For me, building the right leadership team and making sure that really the vision and the strategy of the firm is clear, that it's not only clear to everybody, but they embrace it and they evangelize it. In the early stages, we could have all company meetings around a small conference room table. When you get to 65 people, you really have to, in order to really build that strong culture, build that strong point of differentiation. Consulting is very competitive. There's a lot of firms that do what we do. How do we make sure that all 65 of the people on our team would answer the question the same way when asked, why is Growth Operators different? Why should I hire you instead of another firm? I had great mentors in this regard. In my Golf Galaxy days, I became the CFO of Golf Galaxy when I was 33 years old, and I jumped onto a management team where the youngest person other than me was, 10 years more experienced than I was. So I learned, those folks continue to be great mentors of mine, but the two founders, Randy Zanata and Greg Monham, who I tap routinely for, sage advice, they just reminded me, they said, look, it took us, almost 10 years to really build the right leadership team at Golf Galaxy to where we could really grow with that confidence. And it takes a long time. I don't disagree with them. And I think that more than anything is just getting that element right was probably the hardest work I would say we had to do. Molly,
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree on that.
So the perfect segue, because we want to dive a little bit into qualities of leaders. I can sense that you guys are extremely lucky for the partnership the two of you have. Molly, my career is a little bit more like yours, where I joined what I lovingly refer to as a crazy entrepreneur who has great ideas and is always growing and bringing those in as the operating business partner. So having that type of relationship to me is key. You have it. So starting with you, Molly. So what are your like one or two of your strong leadership aptitudes that you have that complement what Rick has?
I would describe it as, Rick has big ideas as visionaries are. So he has the big ideas, and as a contrast, I'm a Atomic Habits. If you know that book, that's that, kind of the idea of that small improvements every day. That's what I think about. That's how I try to move the needle, working that angle of improvement. So I think that's the nice balance between the two of us, and my ability to kind of translate his vision into what we can execute. It's great to be a visionary. It's great to have all these ideas, but if we can't execute them, that we've kind of lost the goodness of that vision. So my job really is to make sure that I can lead the team to execute those. And then, so that's a trait I have. And I think, Rick also has the ability to kind of rally and hype the team, which I appreciate. I maybe bring what he calls a calm and confidence, so that we can build that trust in the team and empower them to lead and to go forward. So yeah, that's kind of the balancing of our leadership styles.
I love it. Dynamic duo. And you just tugged at something near and dear to my heart, Molly. I just probably about half an hour before we jumped on this call, I was completing my Adams app entries for the day. If you know what that is, that's James Clear's new app that accompanies his book. So you might want to check that out. But yes, that is a virtual textbook for me on how to just kind of break things down and take little steps every day and, become the identity of what you want to become over time. And, there's a lot of themes related to that throughout this conversation I love. Rick, what are a couple important lessons, maybe one or two that you've learned along the way about your particular leadership as your team has expanded? I know that changes so much when you go from the kind of solopreneur founder to a leader of many. And the struggle, sometimes you hear about, kind of the founder mentality versus the manager mentality when it comes to leadership. And, there's a ton of stuff out there, but, the best experience is that street smart learned experience. So what have you learned about your kind of leadership? What's had to change? Maybe something you've had in particular had to stop doing and something you had to start doing along the way.
It would take months for me to tell you everything I've learned in the 14 years that I've been here. And I'm not done learning by any stretch. I'm kind of a lifelong learner. Really, to kind of set the stage, I completely agree with Molly. Thank God for Molly. I skew way right on the visionary spectrum. I really from day one, I bet the garden, not the farm, but in my head, I was betting the farm because I thought, that this could be big. But Molly and I just our styles are really in my humble opinion, kind of a perfect yin yang combination because, even from the first time I had coffee with Molly when we got reconnected through her college friend back in 2011, I guess it was. I explained my vision and Molly said, I get it. Oh, that'll work. And, if we do this and this and this, it's going to work well. Um, I can fall in love with any idea,
Mhm.
but it's not the idea that creates the value. It's the great execution of an idea that creates value. And beyond that, Molly and I have the type of relationship where, Molly can very candidly say, good idea, but not today. We've got other good ideas that that we're working on, those 1% improvements on every day. I think in terms of your question on, stop doing, start doing, I would say, for me, I've learned, being the visionary I am, it's perfectly clear in my mind on what this firm looks like 5 years from now. But, one of my faults among many, Molly would definitely agree with you on this one. I've had to learn to stop explaining. I mean, I'm the type of guy that if you ask me what time it is, I'm going to tell you how to build the watch. And I don't have to do that with Molly. Just, I mean, it was all of here's my vision and what was going to be a 5-minute monologue within the first 30 seconds. Molly said, no, that I love that. That's going to work. So,
Mhm.
she's, she says she's, more the integrator type than the visionary type, but she's a visionary herself. She
Mhm.
listens to that and just gets it. So I've had to learn to stop explaining as much. And in terms of start, I'm an impatient, I'm an impatient guy. I think like a barbell. I mean, I'm big on the front end and coming up with the idea, and then I'm big on looking at the results on the back end to see if there's traction. And I kind of lose sight of all the big things in the middle of that barbell that have to happen in order to get those results. And what I've just had to really start doing is starting to believe in the compounding power of 1% improvements because
Mhm.
I love James Clear's book and I love that, the kind of the 1% improvements is the theme of this podcast. But, the biggest thing I learned from, that book, Atomic Habits, is that if you improve 1% every day, for a year, you're 37 times better at the end of the year.
Mhm.
Not 37% better, 37 times better.
Right.
So, and that's really Molly. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
it's being patient and believing that even though the results aren't necessarily there, because in the early days, you're seeing 1% better results, but by the end of the year, you look back and say, "Holy cow, we're 37 times better at this than we were when we decided this was something important to do." So, I'm a believer.
I love that. I love that reference that because it's so true. It's so true. Kathy, you were going to say?
Well, now that Molly, she's gotten many accolades, which I love. But now let's say, what have you observed of Rick's leadership changing? As you've taken over and built in more of your leadership team, and where have you seen him adapt?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I think visionaries, they need the space to be creative. I think they need to. I think I've seen it too many times with Rick, but I've seen it with other people. They get tasked with all those roles because they have that CEO title, so they've got all that stuff, and I think that's unfair because that they've really got a lot to do just in that visionary role that they have and all of that work that they do. So I think what we learned early on is to give Rick a lot of space to do his best work, and then there was a lot of other work that I should take, and that is where I am best. And there was a lot of work that shifted from me to him. So I think that was what was important early on, is just to be honest that he needed that space to do that. So I wanted to call that out. That was a good. We need to put Rick exactly where he is best. So
I like what you said earlier too, or
Mhm.
Rick said on your behalf, is when the ideas would come, you said you're not saying no, it's not a good bad, not no to the idea, just not now.
Not
yeah.
today.
And I think we did that. And the other observation, I see this a lot with within our community is, you have integrators and visionaries for those that use EOS, but both are highly strategic roles. Because I think sometimes like, well, the visionary is all the strategy and, integrators or whatever have they. No. They're both highly strategic. It's just the skill set of strategically knowing how to operate versus coming up with the next new thing.
Yeah, I think, and that's important to have that lingo, right? I'm not saying no to the ideas. We have a saying between us. We call it future us. Like these are future us things, and it just all that means is it's just that's a great idea. It's just not now, and we can kind of put those off. So we that's how we parking lot that stuff.
All right, this is time to switch to the fun department and maybe even the make-believe department. So, Rick, is there anything you'd do differently if you were to start the business all over again today?
Well, Kurt, you're asking a visionary overthinker question that I could spend the next 3 hours answering. So, I buckle up. If I could do it differently, knowing what I know now, I'd have elevated Molly to an executive leadership position sooner. That one of the benefits of, Molly's essentially done every job in the company. She was client facing and she was our top client facing person. And I think it was from a lot of that experience that, really put her in a position to, standardize our processes because she was so intimately familiar with how we serve clients. But I think if Molly kind of jumped into an executive role to 3 years ago, really, I see what's happened, really since, and those 1% improvements. I just think if I would have done that sooner, I think we'd be further ahead.
Can you do you remember what kept you from doing it sooner?
Well, we were doing so many things at once. We were the classic, we were growing so fast, Kathy, that, really from 2019 through last year, I mean, just keeping up with, 30% compound annual growth. We were dealing with the whirlwind. We were dealing with the tyranny of the urgent. But I've seen such an amazing change since, and I credit a lot of it to EOS, really. I think, we owe a lot to the EOS model. Sue Hawks, tip of the cap to Sue, who I know you all know. Sue's been a
big
EOS implementer. It's really, well, when I got introduced to the visionary integrator concept, really through EOS, it just dawned on me. I know I'm as visionary as they get. I mean, if you go through the visionary integrator kind of checklist, you take that test. Again, there's no question I'm a visionary. I just think Molly's the ultimate integrator. So it was really through EOS that I think it just dawned on me, man, this is a powerful combination.
Right. And one book I love that I recommend, it's called Make the Noise Go Away. And it speaks to that partnership and that role between what you guys have. So Molly, we're going to go to you. As you think of your role and for the company, what excites you about the future? Could be operations or where the firm is going. What are you most excited about?
Oh my gosh, so much. We have been kind of on a mission here to kind of talk to our clients, potential clients, and they've been talking to us about, service lines we should be getting into and what we should be pursuing. And so we're exploring those and what we should be launching. And I think we'll get into those soon. So we've kind of got a whole phase of growth we're prepping for. Now we've kind of got the foundation and we're ready for what's next.
This is actually a question for each of you. I'd be curious your answer. What one piece of advice would you give a new founder, entrepreneur who needs to bring someone in for their next phase of growth? We've got a number of smaller professional services firms throughout Allied, and this is something they're challenged with and wrestle with. Any advice you give to somebody who's kind of in the early stages and kind of bumping up against that growth kind of platform or plateau, if you will? How to proceed next? How to bring in someone to help them with that next phase?
Molly alluded to it earlier, but we've been reinventing ourselves. And I think at a pace that's healthy. We learned in our business that, really at every stage of the game, what got us here, what got us to that point, as Molly kind of alluded to earlier, is not going to get you there. And it's really being able to understand, what it is that's going to get you from where you are to where you're headed, while basically capitalizing on all the things that make you great, but figuring out what 1% improvements you can start making today that, are different. In our case, really focus over the last couple of years has been scalability. I mean, at 14, we became a teenage company last year, and very much like teenagers, you're not a kid anymore, but you're not exactly an adult, but you got to start acting more like an adult than like a kid because you're
Mhm.
headed towards adulthood. So, it's those kinds of things, that I look at, and Molly and I are constantly looking at, what are we doing today that's going to, last us 100, not that Molly and I are going to be around for 100 years of running this business, but we hope our business is, honestly. And what do we need to be mindful of today so the business can sustain, because it's very different than what got us to this point.
I guess I would say, to your point or your ask of, what the piece of advice, I think it's surround yourself with the right people. What I mean by that is, find people that believe in the values that you've put out there, truly, that people that can see the vision, that are ready to shape that vision into life, and that can bring an A game. And when I know that they're fit for us is when they have kind of another gear, right? When you see them go to another level, because that's what we need, right? We need them to show potential for the growth that we're going to experience. And when we find that in our teams, we know it's going to work. And we've been very fortunate that the team that we have assembled is impressive. They do great leadership. Internally, they are empowered to do great work, and they do. And they're built to scale, and they're ready to take us to the next level. So we're so proud and so happy with them.
Great advice.
Great answer. All right, now we'll go to the toy department here. A little fun things to end with. And everybody in the Allied community, I think, I'm going to say suffers from this, but we fall victim to it. We're in the business a lot. We spend most of our waking hours thinking about it, being in it, working on it. But you need to recharge every once in a while, right? And I know US is big on clarity breaks, and not that they invented that, but I think they brought it to light for a lot of us to make sure we mind the store there. So for each of you, what gives you energy or inspiration outside of work? How do you stay on top of your game outside of the office? What's that look like? Molly, I'll let you start.
I would say probably mostly my kids. They give me a lot of energy. I have 4 kids, and so kind of the things that they're into. I actually talk about work with my kids, and they're curious about it, and I think they appreciate what it takes to be a business owner and put this drive into it. So I appreciate their perspective. And then outside of that, just, time away from the business, traveling, it always gives you perspective. You're gone for a while and you come back to it and you see kind of what's happened while you're gone and how the team's grown in your absence. That's one of my favorite things. So.
Love that. Rick, how about you? How do you stay charged?
Well, I think as you alluded to it, at the beginning, Kurt, golf is something I spend a lot of time doing. Sometimes that recharges my batteries, and other times it drains them even further, depending on which golf game shows up. I really enjoy that. And you also mentioned I'm an outdoors guy. I grew up in northern Minnesota, so I could walk 2 blocks in any direction and be in the woods. And Molly's heard me say, on more than one occasion, I got to go spend some time in the woods this weekend. And for me, whether it's backpacking or canoeing or hunting, fishing, there's nothing that the Japanese call it forest bathing. There's something about just being out there and off the grid that tends to, I think, just really recharge the batteries and kind of absorb the stresses that that were there before I took that first step into the woods. So I love doing that.
Love that. Any book or podcast that either one of you are plugged into that you'd recommend to others or that you turn to? This is always a fun.
I have a good
Molly's
podcast.
started an initiative called "What's Rick Reading?"
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I did. A book I just finished. It's called Unreasonable Hospitality. Will Galdera. I got Rick into it. I don't how I finished. Are you very far in it, Rick?
I'm pretty close. Pretty
Okay.
close to being done. Mhm.
It's pretty good. So I'd recommend that one.
Fairly recently. It's a book called The Four Disciplines of Execution.
For sure.
Yeah, Chris McChesney. And I think that really resonated with us too, because, the real concept of that book is that, I mean, in any business, ours, every business that exists, there's this whirlwind of stuff that just, that really consumes your day, but that's the daily grind. 40X, Four Disciplines of Execution, says you should take 20% of your time, determine a wildly important goal, or WIG for short, for the business, and say, for this period of time, whether it's 3 months or 6 months, if we can get everybody in the company spending 20% of their time focusing on this one wildly important goal for the business, it's amazing what you see in terms of results. We sort of adopted that for the second half of this year for our business, and it's had amazing results. So I'm a big fan of that, but if you want 101 more book recommendations, I can do that too.
Well, wonderful. Well, I want to say thank you so much to both of you for, just letting us certainly ask you some questions, but for letting you let all of us behind the curtain and what's made you guys successful and the journey and the things and lessons you've learned along the way. Kathy, anything you'd like to add before we let Rick and Molly get back to their day jobs?
Just a huge congratulations on your success. And again, thanks for sharing the journey, because I know from an allied community perspective, I know we have a lot of our members who are really going to benefit, and your theories as well as your practical way that you're making the business grow is so important. So thank you.
Yeah, this
You're
was a ton
welcome.
of fun. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your insights. We appreciate you. Continued success. Congratulations on where today. And I know that's you're just getting started. So
Mhm.
it'll be fun to watch the growth and how you guys keep moving. So thank
Well,
you
we
so much.
appreciate we appreciate that, and Kurt and Kathy, we'd be remiss if we didn't thank you right back. Molly and I are both members of Allied Executives. We learn a ton from
Mhm.
what you and your great team over there do, and we take a lot of those lessons away and implement them in our business. So
We do.
we're honored that you asked us to be on your podcast here, and we appreciate you both and your team and what you all do for us.
Now, well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Well, with that, we'll wrap our first episode, and we'll look forward to many more. Kathy, thanks for your assistance and being the co-host with the most. You were fantastic. And again, thank you, Rick and Molly, for your time and energy today. I appreciate it. All right, Kathy, that was a ton of fun. Loved getting behind the curtain with Rick and Molly and how they've been able to grow and really get 1% better every day as we started off the podcast with what we wanted to do. They gave us more than a few things. What stuck out to you?
First of all, I hadn't known as much about growth operators as I had. So how fun to be able to be part of the conversation. I want to start at the beginning with what Rick said. And that was that early on, when his idea coming out of the big CFO corporate jobs that he had, that he bet the garden, not the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I just have such respect for entrepreneurs who take all the risk and have the initiative and go in and make it all happen at a time, like he said, when he had 3 kids, bet the garden, not the farm. So start small. He knew it could work, but I just love that. I love the line. I just think it's a really good philosophy and gives you some insight into how entrepreneurs think.
Yeah, one of the things I just adored, because I'm a big believer in, is this concept of 1% improvements every day lead to huge gains, and the reference to being 37 times better in 1 year if you just focus on incremental improvement every day. I think it's a great reminder for all of us, but a great operating principle for any company, really. How do we get better by just doing little things every day, and instead of maybe trying to take on everything all at once, or really big things. It doesn't have to be the big things that get you where you want to go.
Yeah. Just they were talking about the growth period between 2010 and 2020. So 10 years of their 14 years of existence. And during that time, they were really experimenting. So, I mean, and over trying new things. And they didn't say this, but probably, it's always fail fast, fail small, try new things, see if it works. And Rick had the courage to say he didn't get it all right. They made a mistake. I think they launched a sales and marketing division that his comment was, well, then also now they're trying to service 4 verticals or 4 functional verticals. And that was just too much. And so I just think that was really interesting to see, though, over that growth period when they were in that still fairly small, but trying to get bigger, they were just trying new things and not all of them worked.
Yep. The other one that stuck out to me is, Molly mentioned it. It's this move to standardization. So, those are in professional service firms. You and I, our whole career has been in that world. being able to customize and do it different for everybody it's a seductive thing. As you bring people into your organization, as you add customers to your organization, being able to, and the recognition that, hey, we've got to go to market and deliver in a similar way. Otherwise, our brand promise starts to become, well, those weren't their words. I think that's what they were intimating. It's just, I think a lot of professional service firms tend to maybe push back on that or resist that initially. And when they, really, Molly said, hey, when that was one of the big things we did that sparked growth for us, I thought that was interesting.
Well, and I think Rick added to, the most important thing was scalability. And that
Mm-hmm.
initiative led to that. And Molly also, if I recall, commented, and that won't work. Okay, what was successful to get that standardization and common processes is the leadership team buy-in.
Yeah.
And so without that happen, the other thing I found fascinating, because we've all read the books, and to grow, like one key element is having a built portfolio of recurring revenue, or it can really help in terms of that. Well, what they say, they had a 40% growth during 2020, during the COVID year, 30% annualized growth thereafter. That's pretty amazing if I'm, within that, without recurring revenue. But I loved it because then they said, well, they went and found a way to do that. And make sure I have this right, but I think Rick was saying, so they went out and looked for the large private equity firms and partnered with them so as they could support their whole portfolio of businesses. So then even as the companies changed out with that PE firm, they had a partner in that PE firm and then continue to. So to some degree, it's a recurring revenue model, just a little different. But I thought that was,
to get at it.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting how they found a partnership to make it happen.
I loved this quote. This one might go up on my wall. It is not the idea that creates value. It's the execution. The number of times that you can fall back on remembering that, or when you watch other people, it's such a good reminder of we can have all the ideas in the world, but if we don't step off and bring it to market, or don't step off and execute what it is we're trying to do, it's meaningless. I love that. That one's going on the wall.
I like that too. That whole partnership that you can see that they have between visionary and leader, operational leader in the case of Molly, I find fascinating, because when you look at what was Rick's value, and it was that he is the idea engine, but also that he is able to rally and hype the team. I think the comment was that's his job. And then, Molly brings the calm and confident to make sure it happens. And then we think Molly's side, and that's her, she said her job is to be clear on the vision, which is Rick's vision, because you can't have multiple visions, and then lead the team to execute it well. And I wrote this down, and that visionary that Rick needs to have space to be creative. And I think that's such a good takeaway for anybody who's a second in command or who's supporting a visionary or an idea guy or woman to execute, is give them space to be creative, but also your job is to help filter those ideas. And Molly said that, she said, I don't say no, I just say not now, or they call it the future us, the future us. Yeah. Perfect. Because any of us who have worked with big idea people, and you're one and I one, but also, we also execute, and it's like, great idea, just not now. Because we need to stick to our
the piece I'd add to that, Kathy, is they're both visionary in their own way. Rick certainly around maybe the idea or a concept, and Molly's ability to have a vision for how to execute that is such a important skill to have in any organization. But in the yin and yang of the visionary integrator role, it's invaluable. So I thought that was really a clever way of putting it too, and important to understand. It does take a vision to execute, and knowing what the best, smartest, most efficient way to do that is, and how to get it done, because getting it done is not easy. And this I love, because I think it's a great lesson for anybody in a professional services firm that's trying to grow, and especially if it's still founder led, or it's high expense, high cost talent that's delivering the work. You have to, as a professional services firm, figure out how to introduce junior talent in and develop them and have them grow with you, but also to give you the ability to, really deliver a little bit differently, a little bit more effectively, both cost wise, but also just, you can't grow if you don't have people to deliver it in a service business. You've got some experience with that too.
I liked it. I like their model, the top heavy, meaning those individuals that they're consultants who are going to work with clients were at the very, very senior level, brought in those more junior roles. But Molly, I think, was the one who said that also allowed, they had more fun. their team had more fun because now they're working together and timber, their little team model, because now we might have a more junior entry level working with a client as well as that senior leader, and the synergies of that really, they get more experienced and can happen. So the fact that they saw that and could expand their offering, but yet stuck to what they were best at, because I think that was that other point on growth. Like go try a whole bunch of new things, but really, you still got to come back to really what you're best at.
Yeah. Well, awesome. That was a ton of fun, Kathy. I look forward to doing that with you again very soon with our next guests. But man, so many lessons to learn. That's the point of this. A lot of fun. So thank you for joining me on this journey, and we'll look forward to doing it again soon.
They are trailblazers, as are you, Kurt. So thank you for letting me come along on the journey.
All right. Until next time. The Trailblazers podcast is brought to you by Allied Executives, a peer group community for second stage business owners and their top executives who seek to shorten their time frame to success and want to learn, grow, and be challenged. To find out more about the power of peer learning and what it means to be a member of the Allied Executives community, please visit alliedexecutives.com. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please leave us a rating or review and let us know what you think.